What if I told you that the carbs you've been told to cut out of your diet are actually some of the best things you can eat for your energy, your gut, and your waistline? I know, that sounds backwards. For years, carbs have been treated like the enemy. Cut the carbs, they said. Carbs make you fat. Carbs spike your blood sugar. Carbs are empty calories. Well, look, I love food, I love cooking, and when somebody tells me an entire category of food is bad for me, I don't just accept that. I go look at the science. Is that true or is that not true? And in this video, I'm going to break down specific carbs, real foods that when you eat them the right way can actually boost your energy, improve your gut health, and help you stop overeating. Let's start with one that almost everybody has in their kitchen right now and probably eats wrong: oats. The first carb I want to tell you about is oats. Now, oats have this reputation as this boring beige diet food, something you eat when you're trying to be good, right? But here's what's actually happening when you eat oats the right way. Oats are loaded with a specific type of soluble fiber called beta-glucan. This is not just filler. Beta-glucan forms a gel-like substance in your gut when it mixes with water, and that gel slows down how quickly your stomach empties. What does that mean for you? It means your blood sugar rises slowly and steadily instead of spiking and then crashing. And that steady rise is exactly why oats give you that long, even energy, instead of the jittery burst and crash you get from something like a sugary cereal or a pastry. Beta-glucan also feeds the good bacteria living in your gut. Your gut microbiome ferments that fiber and produces short-chain fatty acids, things like butyrate, and those compounds lower inflammation throughout your body and actually help strengthen the lining of your gut. A healthier gut lining means better nutrient absorption and a stronger immune system because remember, a huge chunk of your immune system actually lives in your gut. Now here's the overeating piece, because this is where oats really shine. That same gel-like fiber that slows digestion also keeps you feeling full for hours. Multiple studies have shown that oatmeal produces a stronger feeling of fullness than many other breakfast foods with the same number of calories. So you're not reaching for a snack an hour later, you're satisfied. But, and this is a big but, preparation matters enormously here. If you're eating instant flavored oatmeal packets loaded with sugar, artificial flavoring, and thickeners, you have basically turned a health food into a dessert that spikes your blood sugar just as fast as candy would. So here's what I recommend. Go for steel-cut oats or old-fashioned rolled oats, not the instant packets. Cook them in water or unsweetened milk. Add your own toppings. Cinnamon is fantastic because it has its own blood sugar benefits. Throw in some berries for extra polyphenols and antioxidants. A spoonful of nut butter or some chopped walnuts gives you healthy fats and protein, which slows digestion down even further and keeps you fuller even longer. And portion still matters here too. About half a cup of dry oats, which becomes roughly a cup cooked, is a reasonable serving. You don't need to eat a giant mixing bowl of oatmeal to get the benefit. So oats, when prepared simply, are not boring diet food. They are a legitimate tool for steady energy, a healthier gut, and staying satisfied so you're not overeating later in the day. Let's move to the next one, and this one might surprise you because it's orange and it's sweet, and people assume anything sweet must be bad. Sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes get lumped in with regular potatoes and treated like a starchy food to avoid, especially if you're watching your blood sugar. But that's actually a mistake, and here's why. Sweet potatoes have a lower glycemic impact than a lot of people assume, especially when you eat them with the skin on. That skin is packed with fiber, and fiber slows the release of sugar into your bloodstream. On top of that, sweet potatoes are loaded with a compound called beta-carotene, which your body converts into vitamin A. Vitamin A supports your immune function and your vision. But there's something else going on here that's really interesting for energy specifically. Sweet potatoes contain a healthy dose of complex carbohydrates along with manganese, a mineral your body needs to actually convert food into usable energy at the cellular level. So when people tell you sweet potatoes will drain your energy or spike your blood sugar and crash you, they're missing the fact that this is a nutrient-dense, fiber-rich carbohydrate, not a refined one. Now for the gut health piece. Just like potatoes and rice, when you cook a sweet potato and then let it cool, some of that starch converts into resistant starch. That resistant starch skips digestion in your small intestine and travels down to your large intestine, where it becomes food for your gut bacteria. Those bacteria ferment it and produce those same beneficial short-chain fatty acids we talked about with oats, the ones that calm inflammation and support the gut lining. So a roasted sweet potato you cooked last night and pulled out of the fridge today is actually doing more for your gut than the same sweet potato eaten piping hot straight out of the oven. Here's the overeating angle. Sweet potatoes have a high water and fiber content relative to their calories, which means you get real volume and real fullness without loading up on calories. That fullness factor is a big reason people who add more fiber-rich vegetables and complex carbs like sweet potatoes into their meals tend to naturally eat less throughout the day, without even trying to restrict. Now, preparation really matters here too. A baked or roasted sweet potato skin on is fantastic. Where people go wrong is candied sweet potatoes loaded with brown sugar and marshmallows, or sweet potato fries deep fried in unhealthy oil. That turns a nutrient powerhouse into a dessert or a fried snack. If you want that roasted flavor, toss cubed sweet potato in a little extra virgin olive oil, sprinkle on some cinnamon or smoked paprika, and roast it in the oven. You get that caramelized flavor without drowning it in sugar. One medium sweet potato is a reasonable portion, and again, don't go overboard just because it's healthy. Too much of any carbohydrate, healthy or not, can still add up in calories. Now, most people are out here making decisions about carbs based on outdated, oversimplified advice, cutting out entire food groups without understanding what the actual research says. But if you want the real evidence-based breakdown on how to use food strategically for your energy and your health, subscribe to my channel, because this is exactly what I do every single week. I take the science and I turn it into something practical you can actually use. Okay, the next carb on my list is one that gets ignored constantly because people think it's just a fancy, trendy health food with no real substance. Quinoa. Quinoa is actually a seed, not a true grain, but we eat it and cook it like a grain, so it counts here. And what makes quinoa different from a lot of other carb sources is that it's what's called a complete protein. That means it contains all 9 essential amino acids your body needs but can't produce on its own. Now, why does that matter for energy? Protein paired with complex carbohydrates slows down digestion even more than carbs alone, which means quinoa gives you a really stable, sustained release of energy. You don't get that mid-morning crash you might get from a carb-only breakfast. Quinoa is also rich in magnesium, and magnesium is directly involved in energy production at the cellular level. It's a mineral a lot of people are actually deficient in without even knowing it, and that deficiency alone can leave you feeling sluggish and tired for no obvious reason. For your gut, quinoa contains a nice amount of both soluble and insoluble fiber. The soluble fiber feeds your gut bacteria the same way oats and resistant starch do, while the insoluble fiber adds bulk and helps keep things moving through your digestive tract regularly. And because quinoa combines fiber and complete protein, it's remarkably filling for its calorie count. As for the overeating piece, here's an interesting detail. Because quinoa digests more slowly thanks to that fiber and protein combination, it keeps your blood sugar more stable after a meal. And stable blood sugar is directly tied to appetite control. When your blood sugar spikes and then crashes, that crash is often what triggers cravings and overeating an hour or two later. So a meal built around quinoa tends to prevent that whole cycle from starting in the first place. Preparation-wise, quinoa is actually pretty forgiving. Rinse it before you cook it because it has a natural coating called saponin that can taste bitter or soapy if you skip that step. Cook it in water or broth and then use it as a base. Toss in roasted vegetables, a drizzle of extra virgin olive oil, some lemon juice, maybe some chickpeas or grilled chicken if you eat meat. Where quinoa becomes less healthy is when it's paired with heavy creamy dressings or fried components, or when people eat it alongside processed meats. Keep the preparation clean and simple, and quinoa becomes one of the most efficient carbs you can eat for stable energy and a happy gut. Now let's talk about a food that gets a bad reputation simply because of what section of the grocery store it lives in: beans and lentils. I'm grouping these together because they behave very similarly in your body. Beans and lentils are legumes, and legumes are honestly one of the most underrated carbohydrate sources out there. Here's why. They are absolutely loaded with fiber, both soluble and insoluble, and they also carry a solid amount of plant-based protein. That fiber and protein combination is a 1-2 punch for stable, long-lasting energy. Your body has to work through layers of fiber and protein before it gets to the carbohydrate itself, so the sugar from beans and lentils trickles into your bloodstream slowly instead of flooding in all at once. For your gut specifically, beans and lentils are one of the richest sources of a type of fiber that your gut bacteria absolutely love to ferment. When your gut bacteria break down that fiber, they produce those short-chain fatty acids again. And research has shown that a diet rich in legumes is associated with a more diverse and healthier gut microbiome. A more diverse microbiome has been linked to better metabolic health, better immune function, and even improvements in mood, because a big portion of the neurotransmitters your brain uses, including serotonin, are actually influenced by what's happening in your gut. Now, the overeating benefit here might be the strongest of any food on this list. Beans and lentils have one of the highest fiber to calorie ratios of any carbohydrate source. A single cup of cooked lentils can have around 15 grams of fiber. That is an enormous amount of bulk and fullness for a relatively small number of calories. Multiple studies have found that people who eat legumes regularly report significantly higher feelings of fullness and tend to naturally consume fewer calories throughout the rest of the day compared to people who don't. Preparation matters here too, though maybe less dramatically than with some other foods. Canned beans are perfectly fine. Just rinse them well to cut down on the added sodium. Cook dried beans and lentils in water or broth with some herbs, maybe a bay leaf, some garlic. Where you want to be careful is with things like refried beans loaded with lard, or heavily processed bean dips full of preservatives and unhealthy oils, or bean-based dishes drenched in cheese and sour cream. Keep it simple. A lentil soup with vegetables, a bean salad with olive oil and lemon, black beans with some cumin and a squeeze of lime. These are all fantastic ways to get that fullness, that gut benefit, and that steady energy without the extra junk. According to Dr. Ava Carter, a gastroenterologist who focuses on the connection between diet and gut health, the biggest mistake people make with carbohydrates isn't eating them, it's eating refined versions of them without the fiber that's supposed to come attached. Dr. Ava Carter has pointed out that the fiber in whole carbohydrate foods like legumes, oats, and whole grains isn't just a side benefit. It fundamentally changes how your body processes the sugar inside that food, which changes everything from your energy levels to your appetite to your long-term metabolic health. Before we get to the last one, let's talk about a grain that used to be a staple on every dinner table and has now almost completely disappeared from the modern diet: barley. Barley is one of those carbs that got pushed aside as wheat and rice became easier and cheaper to mass produce. And that's honestly a shame, because barley has one of the highest beta-glucan contents of any grain, even higher than oats in some cases. Remember that beta-glucan fiber we talked about earlier? Barley is loaded with it. And because of that, barley has one of the most well-documented effects on blood sugar of any carbohydrate out there. Multiple studies have shown that eating barley, especially hulled barley, which still has the bran intact, produces a much slower and more controlled rise in blood sugar compared to white rice or white bread. There's actually a phenomenon researchers call the second meal effect, where eating barley at breakfast doesn't just help control your blood sugar during that meal, it actually improves how your body handles the carbohydrates in your next meal too, hours later. That's a pretty remarkable finding, and it tells you just how powerful that fiber really is at regulating your energy throughout the entire day. For your gut, barley's fiber ferments beautifully in your large intestine, feeding your beneficial bacteria and again producing those short-chain fatty acids that calm inflammation and support your gut lining. Research has also linked barley consumption to increases in specific beneficial bacterial species that are associated with a leaner, healthier metabolic profile. And for the overeating piece, that same slow, steady blood sugar response we talked about with the second meal effect means your appetite stays more level throughout the day. You're not getting those sharp dips in blood sugar that trigger sudden hunger and cravings. Now, preparation. You want to look for hulled barley rather than pearled barley when you can, because pearled barley has had more of the bran polished away, which strips out some of that valuable fiber. That said, pearled barley is still a far better choice than white rice or refined pasta, so don't stress if hulled barley isn't available where you shop. Cook it similar to how you'd cook rice, simmered in water or broth until tender, and it has this wonderful chewy texture that works great in soups, stews, or as a base for a grain bowl with roasted vegetables and a drizzle of olive oil. Where barley goes wrong is the same place every other carb on this list goes wrong: when it's turned into a heavily processed product like certain packaged cereals or malted sugary drinks. Keep it whole, keep it simple, and barley becomes a genuinely powerful tool for steady energy and a healthier gut. Let's move on to the last carbohydrate I want to break down for you, and this one is going to challenge everything you think you know about bread: whole grain sourdough. Bread has become almost a dirty word in health circles. People hear bread and immediately think processed, white, empty calories. But real, traditionally made whole grain sourdough bread is a completely different food from a soft, white sandwich loaf. And the difference comes down to the fermentation process. When sourdough is made the traditional way, wild yeast and beneficial bacteria ferment the dough over many hours, sometimes over a full day or longer. That fermentation process actually begins breaking down some of the starches and gluten proteins before you even eat the bread. This does a few really interesting things. First, it tends to lower the glycemic response compared to regular bread, meaning your blood sugar rises more gradually. Second, that fermentation process produces organic acids that can help feed beneficial bacteria in your gut, similar to how fermented foods like yogurt or sauerkraut work. And third, because whole grain sourdough retains the bran and the germ of the wheat, unlike refined white bread, you're getting significantly more fiber, more B vitamins, and more minerals like magnesium and zinc. For energy, that slower glycemic response means whole grain sourdough gives you a more even release of energy rather than the quick spike and subsequent crash you'd get from white bread made with refined flour. For your gut, the combination of fiber from the whole grain and the fermentation byproducts creates a more favorable environment for beneficial bacteria to thrive. And for overeating, the fiber content again plays the starring role. Whole grain sourdough is more filling per slice than white bread, so you're naturally satisfied with less. Now, preparation and sourcing really matter here more than with almost any other food on this list. A lot of bread labeled sourdough at the grocery store is not actually traditionally fermented. It's regular bread with some sourdough flavoring or a small amount of starter added just for taste, and it doesn't carry the same benefits. Look for bread that lists a long fermentation time, or better yet, find a local bakery that makes traditional sourdough, or make your own at home if you're up for it. Pair your sourdough with healthy toppings: avocado, a poached or hard-boiled egg, a drizzle of extra virgin olive oil, some smoked salmon. Where bread becomes a problem is when it's paired with processed meats, sugary jams, or when it's a vehicle for a pile of cheese and butter. 1 or 2 slices is a reasonable portion, not half a loaf. So here's the bigger picture I want you to walk away with. Carbohydrates as a category are not your enemy. What actually determines whether a carb helps you or hurts you comes down to a handful of factors: the fiber content of the food, whether it's whole and minimally processed or refined and stripped of its natural fiber and nutrients, how it's prepared, whether it's cooked in healthy fat like extra virgin olive oil or drenched in sugar and unhealthy oils. And of course, the portion you're eating, because even the healthiest carbohydrate can work against you if you're eating far more than your body actually needs. I've just walked you through 6 carbohydrate-rich foods: oats, sweet potatoes, quinoa, beans and lentils, barley, and whole grain sourdough that, when chosen and prepared the right way, can give you steadier energy throughout your day, support a healthier and more diverse gut microbiome, and actually help you eat less without feeling deprived because you're staying full and satisfied for longer. Notice the pattern running through every single one of these foods. It's the fiber. Whether that's the beta-glucan in oats and barley, the resistant starch in a cooled sweet potato, the fermentable fiber in beans and lentils, or the combination of fiber and slow fermentation in a real whole grain sourdough, fiber is the thread connecting all of it. Fiber is what slows down digestion, so your blood sugar rises gradually instead of spiking. Fiber is what feeds the trillions of bacteria living in your gut and keeps that ecosystem diverse and functioning well. And fiber is what fills you up and keeps you full, so you're not reaching for something else an hour later. So the next time somebody tells you carbs are the problem, remember, it's not the carbohydrate itself, it's whether that carbohydrate still has its fiber attached, and whether you're preparing it and portioning it the right way. Most people are still making food decisions based on outdated diet trends and oversimplified rules that treat entire food groups as good or bad. But if you want to understand how to actually use food strategically based on real science to support your energy, your gut, and your overall health, subscribe to my channel, because this is exactly the kind of practical, evidence-based breakdown I release every single week. See you in the next video.